how do we take a team of mixed skill levels and optimize it for the best results that are possible?
Yeah, hi, Scott. So welcome to the Software Engineering Tales, and I'm really glad to have you.
Me too. Thanks for having me on.
When I was thinking how to introduce you, I had a little bit of an issue because I have upcoming sessions with software engineers, product management people, with uh, with some testers, but I just couldn't figure out how to categorize you. So if you could introduce yourself and tell us what you do today.
Oh boy. Yeah, I kind of defy categorization. Let's see. So obviously, my name is Scott Varho, but and I now I founded a company that does advisory services for organizations, especially B2B SaaS organizations, um, on the philosophy that integrated organizations outpace less integrated organizations. So I help them achieve a better, higher level of integration as an operating model among all the leaders, the metrics, the ecosystem, the points of emphasis, helping them with different types of rituals that you can introduce, and so forth. My background, however, so my current um, position is really backed by my experiences as a product professional. So I was a business analyst working on teams, and then was leading product teams as a product management professional, and then I was leading teams of product managers and user experience, and then eventually was leading engineering. And then while I was at Three Pillar, which was my most recent experience, was actually leading, you know, over 2,500 professionals globally in product management, engineering, front end, back end, QA, all the different disciplines, user experience, data, DevOps, all of the different
Yeah,
things, trying to think about how to talk to clients about these things and get the most value from them.
yeah,
So, yeah, that's in a nutshell.
yeah. That's cool. And how do you like the transition from like being a VP with 2,500 people underneath you and leading a big organization to your small own business?
Yeah, it's a hefty trade off for me because I love being part of team, and
Yeah,
so I miss the craftspeople. You and I have talked about this many times, but I really love craftsmanship, the culture of craftsmanship that Three Pillar has, as well as just being around craftspeople and helping them elevate how they practice what they do and generate even more value.
yeah,
I think it's gratifying for
yes,
good craftspeople to build things they're proud of.
yeah.
Um,
It's just so
and
cool, right? Built together,
oh,
great stuff.
it's my drug of choice. It's so fun. I mean, not only to build something you're proud of individually, but also be part of something that's building something even better than you could build on your own as a group. I think it's an amazing feeling if you're into that kind of thing, which I find a lot of people are, even if they don't think they are. Um, and so that was a lot of fun. And so I miss team. I miss team a lot. I miss affecting the culture. But now I get to do that from a different vantage point and help people be better versions of themselves as individuals, as well as help leadership teams create conditions for
Yeah.
people that I won't get to meet, but I'm still a fan of affecting their lives in a positive way. And so I still scratch that itch, but I'm looking forward to the day that I can be a part of a team again, more on a more permanent basis.
Yeah, so basically it's only you in this company right now that you started.
Yeah, more or less. So I have partners that I work with. I'll bring them in if the work requires. But yeah, I'm the only employee of Olo at the moment. That's the name of my company, Olo. Um, but yeah, but I have people that I network with. I actually just got off the phone just a moment ago with someone that I'm going to be collaborating on a client engagement
Yeah, that's
going
cool.
forward. So yeah,
That's cool. Yeah, and you
it's fun.
mentioned that your
What
company. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say one of the things about being as old as I am, and as old as I feel, is that I know a lot of people, so I can bring different people to bear on different problems.
Yeah,
That's a nice thing.
that's cool. But you know how they say it, your network is your net worth. So it's really cool that
That's
you
right.
have this vast network, and I'm proud to be a small part of your nice network of people. And the funny thing, just to give everyone a little bit of context, is that you named your company Olo, which I think is
Mhm.
associated with Olomouc, right?
It is. It is. Yes. Olomouc, for those of you that don't know, town is it still about 100,000 people
Yeah, yeah,
living in
yeah,
Olomouc?
yeah,
Um, so Olomouc is a relatively small, medium-sized town in Moravia, in the Czech Republic, and it just so happens, and Pavel knows this, but I studied there. I did my master's in political economics um, in Olomouc at Pulaski University, which is a very strange thing, but it was something that I really wanted to do. I studied history undergrad, particularly Central European history. I was very interested in the post World War II emergence, or post World War One, sorry, emergence of
yeah,
Czechoslovakia, and the breakup of the Habsburg Empire. Anyways,
yeah,
so nerdy, weird fact about me, but Ola was where I learned because I studied economics. I started thinking about humans and the way we generate systems to govern how we interact. And so economics is such an obvious one. Like I mean, money's a construct. It's not a real thing in nature. So these different constructs that we create in order to govern human behavior and interactions, and if you apply that to product development, you get really interesting insights into, like, why do we do agile, and what
yeah.
what kind of anti patterns tend to set in. And so it wound up, all of my time in Olomouc wound up being oddly relevant to my career in technology, even though I wasn't studying technology
Yeah.
while I was there.
I have a similar background, or not similar, but I did sales for a couple of years, and then I switched to software
Mm-hmm.
engineering, and I found all these people skills that I got along the way really useful. And I, I've heard opinions that today, let's say, most of the issues we face in the software engineering are basically people issues and are basically
Yes.
communication issues. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I 100%, because I mean, and I was really lucky. One of my earliest mentors, when I first started managing people for the first time, um, he told me, he said, Scott, humans build technology. Pay attention to the humans. That's where
Yeah,
all the action is. And it was a great insight at that point in my career, because I was just falling in love with how impactful technology could be, when I really need to be focused on how do I keep humans on the same page, whether it's my stakeholders as a product executive or my team as a leader. Um, that was where all the magic has happened then and since. But you're usually, if you're spending a lot of other people's money, which we typically are, whether
yeah,
you're an engineer or a product, this is a lot of money that they're investing. They have a lot of skin in the game. Managing the emotions around that, and the belief, the sense of trust, reliability, alignment. I mean, these all take a lot of psychology. A lot of the human aspects are really the most important aspects to what we
yeah,
do. And if you think about it, like, how much money are we going to make from this investment in technology? Of course, the answer to that question is unknowable, except in reality. But it could fail, and you could say, well, it's because of these people didn't do what they were supposed to do, or, so there's a lot of speculation that surrounds what we do, and what actually is going to happen is somewhat unknowable until it happens. And then you can always say to yourself, well, this could have turned out differently, and maybe that's true, and maybe it's not. You don't really know, and that makes the sport really, really important to manage the psychology of all the players along the way.
yeah,
So I completely agree with that statement. It's 9/10 of this is not, it's not tech, it's not skills, it's managing the expectations and the realities of what it's like to do this together.
yeah. I like to say that the to write the actual code is just the last step, and we are in a business of problem solving. We need to first solve the problem and then just translate it into the code. But the very first thing that we need to do is to actually know what problem to solve, right?
Yep,
And I think,
absolutely.
yeah, and I think it's sometimes so hard to get the requirements correct. I i even recently saw this study. I think it was from Deloitte, and they did it
Hmm.
white paper like 2 years ago. And actually they claimed that, like, over 60% of all the defects in the final product are the ones that originated from like requirements phase. The root cause is like the requirement phase, and
Yep.
it's also like if you catch it in the beginning before everyone starts working on that, it's really cheap to fix, right?
No, that's definitely true. And then there's wonderful images that show that there's an order of magnitude cost to fixing issues every step that it gets further downstream. So
Yeah,
if you catch something in the requirements phase and fix it there, it costs 1/1000th what it will cost if you catch it in QA, right? Is another way to say it. So like the requirements phase, the engineering phase, the QA phase, and then of course you've got production, which is another order of magnitude. So you're talking about, you know, uh, 10,000 times the cost in production of what you could have fixed in the requirements phase. However, the myth of perfect requirements is also a myth.
yeah,
And also the myth of the word requirements itself, we should actually be skeptical of, because the requirements suggest that it's a unidirectional, I tell you what needs to be built and you build it. That's not how this works. It's much more negotiated, and we're going to discover new information. And so part of the greatness of good product teams is anticipating where change is likely to happen in the future. And you know this as an engineer, whether you
yeah,
choose to abstract a variable or hard code it has everything to do with how malleable you think that area of the code is going to be, which is a guess. You're speculating. But more context means you're better able to speculate on that. More experience means you're less likely to over or under engineer it. But even if you under engineer it, we can refactor it later on. It's okay. It costs more, but it's future spending when we have new information to suggest that future spending is worth it. So the variable that I often remind people is the most weird, most valuable, the most important to keep in mind is time.
yeah,
Humans tend to think requirements and product, but our products are living things. They are code bases that will evolve over time. Areas will get refactored. There's nothing wrong with that. That's totally natural. And so anybody, but I've worked
yeah.
for executive CEOs who've said to me, every time the code gets refactored means somebody in the past made a mistake. And I'm like, that's not true.
No,
We don't have perfect information. We have evolving information. And what would we be if we weren't paying attention to new information? We should.
yeah,
And so when you think about it that way, it's the humility and the judgment that we bring that builds great products now and in the future. Remembering that value is a especially in digital products is a function of time and value, right? So a little bit of value over a lot of time generates a lot of value. But just as importantly, a little bit of value destroyed, defects or poor performance or those kinds of things over a lot of time destroys a lot of
yeah,
value. So those things like reputation and the feeling of your customers, those are hard to get back. And so I try to keep all those things in balance as a product professional and think about how can we leverage the new information that we have today that we didn't have yesterday, and that we're constantly evolving as a team on our instincts on where do we protect ourselves, our future selves, and that you can do that in terms of even in your craft, right? Like in commenting the code well,
yeah,
so that your future self, when you come back and look at it, you're like, I don't remember what this thing does, this method. I don't remember. Why would you remember? So or maybe it's for your colleague that's going to go back and refactor that code. We do these things to protect our future selves. Where do you do that? Where do you not do that? How much do you do that? That's a lot of judgment. This is not just science. There is a lot of judgment, and I think that experience
yeah,
helps us hone that judgment.
yeah.
So
And
I think
how
that's a really important factor is thinking of time as an element of product.
how do you build the team that has the right amount of balance in all these aspects and the right amount of judgment? Because I have seen teams where you know it's it's one or two very senior developers influencing all the decisions and all the direction of the team. Then I have seen like strong product owners who influence a lot of this. So how do you find this balance? How do you build a team that's really good at this?
Yeah. Well, so I think one interesting anti-pattern. I'll start with the anti-pattern, and
Yeah,
then we can talk about how do you get towards the other one. But the common anti-pattern is someone on the team that's overly verbose, overly controlling, right? So they're
yeah,
like, I'm responsible for everything we put out. If it breaks, I have to fix it, right? So this oftentimes is the senior engineer who's seen as
yeah.
they're
Like
going
the
to review everyone's
superhero,
code before it
right?
goes out.
Yeah.
Exactly, right. And we've seen them. We've all experienced them, um, and some of us have even been them. I'm guilty. I've done
Yeah.
that. I've been
Tried
overly
to.
overly controlling. And but the fact is that empowered teams run faster at the problem and at the solution. They're going to generate more value more quickly. So how do we take a team of mixed skill levels and optimize it for the best results that are possible? And so, setting people, I oftentimes will say, if you let go, you set yourself free, not just yourself, but also your teammates. And so it's not that they're not going to make mistakes, and it's likely that you're going to make mistakes. The additional control has a cost. And so realizing that that cost is not ultimately in your best interest, it's not in the team's best interest, it's not in the product's best interest. So it's getting those seniors to think about, we're here to coach and not to control.
Yeah.
And that difference is so fundamental to the way teams work. So a really good senior engineer that has good instincts will say, look, the person next to you, you might think they're terrible now, but you're going to help them be a better version of themselves. That's going to help you. That's going to help the team. That's going to help the product. So let them make the mistakes and then coach them through them. I used to have little rules, little tips and tricks. Like, I want everyone on the team to struggle with anything they're facing that they don't have the answer to. I want them to struggle no less than 4 hours, or it was no less than, sorry, it was no less than 2 hours, no more than 4 hours.
No more than 4.
Because 4 hours is half a day, right? If they struggle longer than 4 hours, they're hurting the team's commitment.
Yeah.
But if they struggle less than 2 hours, then they're going to the senior too quickly.
Yeah. They are giving up too quickly, right? Yeah.
Right. And you want them to struggle. The struggle will help their learning and growth. And that's not an investment in this sprint. That's an investment in all future sprints. And so again, I think about this time horizon that I talked about before, such a critical variable. Our team is not a finished product. Our team is going to grow. It's going to change. It's going to evolve. Every member of the team is going to get better at what they do. They're going to get more knowledgeable about the product, more knowledgeable about our users. And so thinking about that time horizon is really critical, because it's like, look, Pavel, I'm not judging you on our next release. I'm judging you on the next year's releases. Right? So help the team get better. And that's not going to come from you being a hero. That's going to come from you picking your spots and molding the team so that we're better as a unit, and so that those junior engineers also ask really dumb questions. I found amazing innovations have come from dumb questions, because when a team stops asking certain kinds of questions because we just take it for granted, sometimes that's efficiency and sometimes it's myopia. We just forgot to look at stuff differently. And so you'll have a junior engineer come in and be like, why do you guys do it this way? Be like, I don't remember. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And they'll say, well, why don't we do it this way? And it's like, I don't think we've ever thought about that, or that wasn't available to us at the time. The other thing that's changing all the time is the tools available to us with the techniques.
Yeah.
So encouraging people to embrace their voice, regardless of their seniority. Your voice is not less valuable because you're more junior. You have the benefit of being fresh, and having a different context that you're coming from. You're not so inured into what we do that you don't see some of the details that we've forgotten.
Yeah. I think that,
and so
really important, to build like a no blame culture in a team, and to encourage everyone to really ask questions, even if it's dumb. And the worst case, you can say, okay, let's talk about that later on, because that's like basic knowledge, and we can spread the knowledge a little bit more. But I actually remember way back when I was dabbling a little bit into the science. This really famous professor from Czech Republic, he was into theoretical chemistry, and he said that
theoretical chemistry. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah. like a quantum chemical simulations on computers, and you are trying stuff. And he was like,
that's crazy.
Ask anything that's on your mind, and sometimes the simplest questions are really hard to answer. And the question that he made an example of was, why DNA is from these 4 bases, why it's not some other chemical compounds. And he was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And they made a research on that, and they actually found out that in the beginning, when there was a lot of space rays and radiation on the Earth, these four
Mm.
substances were much more stable than other similar substances, so they couldn't
Mm.
mutate so much. And that's just wonderful example. So your
Yeah.
nail dumb question can help team 2 months of work because there is this framework they didn't know about or this approach they didn't try, and you just did it on your last job. So yeah, ask them questions and don't be worried about that.
Well, and I think too, and you and I have spent a lot of time at Three Pillar talking about the product mindset, and one of some of the history of the product mindset is on the growth mindset. So also thinking about the team as I think this point that I made is really important. The product, the team, and the individuals on that team are not finished products,
Yeah,
right? So we're constantly becoming, and so judging each of our teammates, whether they're in a leadership role, a quasi leadership role, or they're individual contributors, thinking about like what I want to see from you is a better version of you in a year from now or 6 months from now or a month from now. So how are you fostering that in your teammates? Right? Like it's a different metric for performance than just again yesterday's code that we delivered. That's too myopic. If I'm going to build a really great product, it's going to be because we're constantly evolving and we're growing. And those dumb questions I think are wonderful ways, because a lot of times it's not the question itself, it's a proxy. Like
yeah,
maybe you ask me something that I think is really fundamental, but it gets me thinking about something else that I hadn't thought about in a really long time, or just never thought to question. Um, those discussions are where the really unique, because if you think about what we're doing, we're trying to create products that are insightful, right? So we have to know something or figure something out that others haven't figured out, and that's usually not in the tech. It's usually something about the humans
yeah,
that are benefiting from our technology, right? That's where those are the richest fields. Even though we fall in love with AI and all these other new tools, it's not the tools that deliver the value, it's the insight.
yeah,
How to connect the tool to the problems that humans have in a unique way that creates an unbelievable amounts of value. And so encouraging that kind of growth mindset, that exploration, whether we call them dumb questions or we don't, um, that's where all the magic is going to happen. That's where the alchemy is going to happen. We're going to turn lead into gold. It's going to be because of something that was unexpected, some exploration. um, that's where all the magic happens.
yeah. Okay, yeah, that's something to think about. Yeah, definitely. All right. So let's turn the page. And one other
I have a
thing.
question for you.
Yeah.
Can
Okay.
I ask you a question?
Wow. Okay.
So,
Let's do it.
you and I have talked about craftsmanship many times, and we just touched on an important aspect of craftsmanship, which is judgment.
Yeah.
How do you think about judgment, or how do you advise junior people to hone their judgment as engineers as they grow and learn?
Wow. that's that's a bit, I think, difficult because what I like to say is that you grow more senior, more mistakes you make, and and being senior just means that you do much less mistakes because you have made a lot of them already. And I think this judgment just comes with the experience, and it comes with like the confidence. The confidence is not that I know everything, but the confidence is
Mhm.
that I can solve a lot of problems. And the part of the judgment is not to be so sure about things. I think
Mm.
it's a bit like in the beginning you are like learning, you are gaining confidence. Now you think that you know everything, and then you go back to the beginning and to the bottom because you realize that you know nothing, basically. That's the nice thing because
Socratic wisdom.
yeah, it's like with the code. You start using all these fancy syntactic sugars, and you try to do like elegant code, and the way that you think it's elegant, but in the end you end up with like simple readable code
Yeah.
because someone else needs to use that code. And usually it's after you get back to some part that you wrote 6 months ago, and you don't know what the heck is going on.
And
So
you're like, that isn't so elegant.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But But just to be a little bit more serious, I think it's a lot about mindset too. When I started as a junior dev, I spent a lot of time getting into the right mindset. Listening to people like Uncle Bob and
Mm-hmm.
listening to approaches
Love
like
Uncle Bob.
clean code and stuff like that, just to get into that proper mindset. And then then we first met. I think it was after I was couple months in the company, and
Mm-hmm.
you was actually one of two first people I met from like the headquarters. You came all the way to Olomouc, and we were sitting in
Mm-hmm.
this conference room like, I don't know, 30 reps, and you asked one question then that then I was thinking about it like months after that. And do you
Oh my
remember
gosh.
what the
What did I
question
ask you?
was? The
No, I
question
have no
was,
idea.
what does quality mean in software
Mm.
development? So what does quality mean in software development, Scott?
You want me to give my answer?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, I mean, it's now I have such a wordy answer. Let me see.
Oh.
I have to think of a pithy version. So while we were at Three Pillar, one of the initiatives that I led that followed that visit to Olomouc was the Product Development Health Index,
Hmm.
creating 121 different questions of quality rated on a scale of 0 to 5 that we could look at that covered everything from, functional quality to non-functional quality to performance to uptime. Um, all the security, right? What are all the hygiene and things that we could do? What things would we recommend? And then, but this is where judgment comes into play. A high quality product optimizes your ROI. So overspending on everything, like, a great, I'll get to something that I think is really interesting
Hmm.
or illustrates this point. The National Security Agency in the United States, or the CIA, they spend an ungodly amount of money on cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense. And they have government resources to do so. No company I've worked for has ever been able to spend that much money. Does that mean that they don't think security is as important? Of course not. But it doesn't make sense for them to spend the same amount of money on cybersecurity as those government agencies do. Similarly, if I was to say, okay, I've got a mobile gaming app and I've got my Bank of America mobile app. These are two mobile apps. One of them should be spending more money on security than the other. The stakes are different, right? So
Yeah.
the thing is to think about quality. Quality is we understand what our optimal would look like, what we could do, and all the different ways that we could spend money in whether it's performance. We should be sub-second on everything or sub nanosecond. Like we can really tune performance, but this, we can over engineer any aspect of the product
Yeah.
we want. And so how do you optimize this to make sure that the product is well aligned? So a high quality product thinks about all of these things in context and conjuncture with each other. So a great example, I did a lot of research on page load time. It turns out humans respond very differently to page load time given different types of transactions online. If it's a workflow application, think about your timesheet,
Yeah.
right?
Huh.
Timesheets, when they're done by NetSuite and they're really slow,
Yeah.
it's amazing how many times, like, I personally would switch away from the page because it would take too long to fill out the timesheet. Like you click on it, you put a number in, and they have to wait for it to reload the page.
Yeah.
That's terrible. But it's because if you read the psychology, any workflow application, humans need it to be sub-second or even sub 100 millisecond. And so in order to stay in their flow, if you take them out of their flow, they get
Yeah.
bored, they get itchy, they get anxious, which is exactly what happened to me. I'd switch off the tab, my session would time out, and now I have to restart the whole thing over
Yeah.
again. And
Definitely.
it makes the process really frustrating.
Yeah.
And really just annoying. But if you read the psychology, you understand why this is so important for that particular task, which is different than Google. Google did research on search performance, and they found that if they slowed down the search results to get a little bit more accuracy, even by an imperceptible amount, meaning the user could not see any difference,
Yeah.
they could not see any difference, they would search like 30% less. So it made a massive difference in Google's reach and frequency of utilization to just get a little bit more accurate and a little bit slower. Again, underneath users' ability to see any difference. So they weren't saying, "Oh my God, the search results were loading too slow." They couldn't see it. They saw no difference, but
Yeah.
they still searched less. So my point to that is to understand user behavior, right? But again, so Google went back to less robust results delivered faster is better. Users prefer it. They prefer it according to their behavior, not according to what they say. You're not giving them a choice. It isn't a switch. It isn't something they have to cognitively think about, but their behavior shows that they prefer this. They're
Yeah.
more likely to do more switches on Google if you do this. So really interesting stuff. And so as product professionals, we have to think about how these things come together to form a product. Performance, security, uptime. If it's not available, it doesn't matter what else you do. So uptime is clearly very important. The usability of the product, the quality, and then the quality of the engineering. And it's interesting. Engineers get very stuck on clean code and
Yeah.
these types of things. And I think
Unit
that's
test
hugely important
coverage.
because
Yeah.
yeah, unit test coverage, right? All the, and I think about dynamic code analysis and static code analysis because I want engineers to check in code. So the principle that I use is if you check in code and you get maximum feedback at that moment, you as an engineer don't have to, we just talked about the cost of defects
Yeah.
if they go down the line. So for an engineer, if you check in code and you get back a bunch of responses, like here's all the unit tests you broke. Now, as long as they were the unit tests you meant to break, then the code does exactly what you expected it to do and nothing that it wasn't meant to do. But if it breaks a bunch of other tests that you didn't expect, those are now areas for you to go look at. Maybe those were unintended but benign consequences of what you changed. And then you just need to update the tests, right? That's normal. Or you broke things that you didn't expect because you didn't know that this method that you affected affects 20 other things that you had no idea because you don't know the whole code base in your head. Like you can't. And so when you think about that, like what is the ecosystem of good product development over time? Again, when the code base was, 5 engineers created code in the last month, you could probably hold the entire code base in your head and you could tell me every single change and what it would affect. But at some point, the product is going to get complex enough that complexity cannot be managed by individuals. And that's where you need these tools, the scaffold. And I use the metaphor of scaffolding. If you're building a building, but imagine you're constantly rebuilding that building, like we do product, you got to have scaffolding outside that building so you can do good work. Otherwise, you can't do good work on that building. So we need effective scaffolding. So the scaffolding, the security, all those things need to match where your product is, how valuable is the data that you hold, how important is protecting the privacy and security of your users, right? All of those factors play into what is optimal quality given your circumstances. And it's never a function of like, well, we're going to just punch security because we don't want to deal with the cost. Like that's not quality. That's gamesmanship. And so it's about optimizing all of these factors and bringing them into alignment against your market and against your users' expectations and your business goals.
So
that's what I think quality is.
Yeah.
I wish I had a short answer.
No, but that's exactly what I also think because we all know like what ultimate, game in all these areas would look like. But usually that's an overkill. And then I think the quality is to making like conscious decisions about all these areas where I know what.
But this is where judgment is so important. Right. Now we're back to this concept of judgment. Like we're making trade-offs and some of these we may regret, right? Like no matter how big the wall is around security, someone could jump over it. Someone could get into our environment. Given enough time and energy, we know all products are hackable. Even the NSA and the CIA are hackable, right? Yeah. So given that, it's an unwinnable war. But our goal is to keep the wall high enough that people don't consider it worthwhile to jump over it, right? Yeah. I like to use home security metaphors, right? Like, I don't know if you have bars on your window or an armed security guard at your house, but again, you probably lock your front door. So you are doing something on security, but you're not doing everything you could do. And it's not because you don't care. Like you care about your family. Like, it's just judging risk and value.
I'm not going to pay for guards, right?
That's right. Yeah, you're not going to pay for an armed guard. But if you were Britney Spears or Taylor Swift, you probably would.
Yeah.
Because there's enough motivated people out there that's worthwhile. Yeah. So you have to make those judgments, and it's all about how do you assess risk? But to do so consciously and to call these things into the cognitive sphere where we can rejudge these and say, are we doing the right things? that's a team I think that's really thinking about quality and applying quality with their best possible judgment. Um, it can get uncomfortable, because if I tell a CEO I have decided not to do something on security and something happens, they're going to be like, you made the wrong call. And it's like, did I?
Yeah.
Or did the unfortunate low probability thing happen?
Yeah.
It's not, so having, I think, a cogent conversation about risk and defense, about future quality. How do we, like, you can abstract too many variables, you can over engineer it and make it really hard to maintain this code base or change it in the future.
Definitely.
You don't want to do that. Our ability to change quickly and predictably is really important to our value proposition, not just today, but in the future. So if we build a product that future us can't maintain, this is going to be really hard. And we'll see degrading results and degrading throughput over time. That's not doing our company any favors. So while over engineering can be really attractive when you're like, I just want to be ready for every change that could ever come. Well, no, I need you to apply probability. Let's be ready for the changes we think are likely to come, and we'll refactor for the rest. It's okay.
Yeah. And would you say that to build products is today like slower process, and it costs more than compared to 10, 20 years ago? Or
Definitely not. I mean, the tools that we have today are so much better than and obviously we could talk about Copilot, but let's take Copilot and all the other, developer assist tools out of the picture. The fact is like very few, and this is a shame as a old guy, a purist, I don't know what you want to call me, but like, how many Java developers do I meet that don't have any idea how to write SQL? Because Hibernate does it for them, right? And it's like, well, or Active Record if you're a Ruby, or, they all have some data access control, mechanism in play. And that means that I have a bunch of engineers who don't know how to work with the data layer. And oftentimes, especially if you have a product that's really successful, you're going to run into scale and speed performance issues. Because guess what? Those things write subpar SQL.
Yeah.
They don't write fully optimized, SQL, which is totally
definitely.
Yeah, it's just not optimized, which is fine until you get to a scale where that really matters, because you're running at hyperscale and your thread counts are going up on your database. I mean, I've had to nerd out about this. I've experienced all kinds of problems in this space before. Or you look at the way we do schema changes now. Like, schema changes are so much less costly than they used to be. So we can do those things. So I don't have to invest as much analysis paralysis up front on, we got to have the ultimate data schema because I don't want to change this ever. It's like, no, we can change schemas now, especially with some of the cloud services that are available. So the tools have really helped us speed up things that were just really boring building blocks of products before. Those things are much easier now.
Yeah.
But the funny thing that changed, and this is what's so interesting, it's really, I'm such a nerd. I studied sociology of the family when I was in college, or it was one of the classes that I took. And the professor made this comment that has always stuck with me. He said, the history of domestic technologies like the dishwasher or the washing machine or the dryer is that these things did not, the belief was these were going to free up so much time. Because think about how long laundry took.
Yeah.
When you had to do it manually, you're scrubbing the laundry and you're pinning it up outside and, waiting for it to dry, and then you're taking it down, you're ironing everything. We don't do that anymore. But you know what? Our expectations shifted. We now want our laundry done twice or 3 times a week. We don't want it done once a week. So, or once a month or whatever the cadence was before, because you just couldn't do it that often. So one thing that changes, it's not that technology is harder to build, it's that our expectations of technology have shifted upwards, which I think is a good thing. Right. And so I think there's a lot of human psychology in the expectation gap. I often tell people, I'm like, as a career path, I have decided to live in between ambition and capacity. Like, ambition is always higher than capacity. And so my job is basically to try to get the best out of the capacity to support as much of the ambition as possible. And that's what product is all about, which means you live in tension all the time. And that's the same for software engineer. That everyone in product development is living with that tension. Yeah. The expectations are always greater than what we can achieve. And so how do we make people feel good about what it is we've chosen to do and okay with the things that we've chosen not to do this sprint or this month or this release or this year? And that is really hard because the ambition is
always too high.
You cannot satisfy it, and that's okay. But it's a Faustian. If you've read Faust, it's a Faustian pursuit. You cannot satisfy it. and that's okay. But it's beautiful because look at all we can do. We can do any of it. We can do anything. We can't do everything. Is another way to say it.
Yeah. So what do you think is the biggest bottleneck today in software engineering? Like, what's the biggest issue?
Well, I don't know that I can answer. Let me think. Let me give a personal answer first,
Yeah.
and then I'll try to think of a market answer. So a personal answer for me is so I'm going to quibble with you. You said that judgment was a function of experience,
Yeah.
but I don't think it is. There's some other element there, and I'll call it wisdom, because there are people who have the same experiences. Take two people that have the same experiences and draw very different lessons from those. Let's point to one that's an anti-pattern. So I worked with an executive who was the CEO of a massive company that we bought. This was back when I was at a different company, not Three Pillar. And he said to me once, he goes, Scott, we tend to have problems around releases. I think we should stop releasing. I mean, it's a perfectly fine conclusion to reach. It's just exactly the wrong conclusion. If you want to get better at releases, you do them more often, right? Like teams should get good at changing code without weird things happening.
If it's painful, just do it more often, right?
Do it. Yes, you get good at it, right? Like, I mean, because we're not going to stop releasing or release once a year. That's catastrophic. What we need to do is release every 2 weeks like clockwork and have it be a non-event, which means we got to be more buttoned up upstream in how we do things. So there's a lot more predictability downstream, which makes us more reliable, et cetera, et cetera. So, but it's an unwise conclusion to draw from that experience. It's the wrong conclusion. So one of the things that I've been trying to identify is who are people who are deriving wisdom from experience versus people who are deriving anti-patterns or anti-wisdom, if you will, from experience, because it's not years. Yeah. It's wisdom that I'm looking for. I can find somebody that's really long in the game that I don't want to build products with. And I can find somebody very young in the game that I absolutely want to build products with. And the delta is good judgment. And I don't know how to call it other than that, but there's something about that wisdom piece that we miss. Where do you see the uncommon pattern that leads to better results as a whole? And again, I think time is the really big one. We don't need to be good at releases right this second. We need to get good at releases as soon as possible. So what's the best way to get there?
Yeah.
That type of thing. So I that's my, because it's also a meta. It's not about the skill.
Yeah.
I do think data privacy is going to be a big issue. I mean, it's only getting worse. The tools that our hackers are using. So I will give you a market answer. The tools that the hackers are using is accelerating.
Yeah.
You can be dumber and dumber about technology and do the hacking.
Yeah.
You know this. It's very readily available to go get bots that will do dictionary attacks. That's incredibly low sophistication, but very effective.
Yeah.
The fact is
a lot of people. Yeah.
A lot of people still use very guessable passwords or the same password on every single site. And how many of the services they're already using have already been breached. And so it's very easy for me to get a password that Pavel has used once before. And it doesn't cost me a lot to try 50 variations of that password on 92 sites that I think you might be using, including your bank. Right. So these things it's just easier and easier to do it. So I think more people will try it. And the developers, this, are not worried about, they're not focused on that problem. Yeah. They might be doing hygiene, but they're not doing defense. Mm-hmm. There's not very many companies that are doing effective defense, meaning in real time, who's trying to hack my product today, right now. DDoS attacks, your cloud provider will take care of. Those aren't really effective, not effective anymore. But for more direct micro attacks that are just as likely to be debilitating, there's just not a lot of companies that are doing active defense, but there's a lot of people doing active attacks. And it's just too easy. It's too easy.
Yeah, that's a big issue. Yeah, definitely. That's
really. So there, I think the spend on the people who provide products and the spend on the parts of people who attack products, there's just a massive imbalance there, and eventually our industry is going to have to come to terms with that and rethink. I mean, I'm a big nerd on identity and access management. That's what I headed up for Pearson, which is an area that nobody likes to think about. I tell everybody it's like the toilet. You just want the toilet to work. You don't really want to talk about it. Like I don't. It's
Where
not
it goes,
interesting to me.
how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But when it stops working, I want to know what the heck is going on.
Yeah.
So I was that guy for Pearson, which made me a huge nerd. But it's really interesting to think about how we manage our identities online, how many different identities we have, and how we use our identity, and then of course that creates vectors for abuse. Um, so I do think there's another wave of technologies coming for that problem. How do we how do we better represent ourselves authentically? How do we authenticate better online so that we get access to the things that are ours, not access to the things that aren't ours digitally? So that's an interesting space in general. But those are like market problems
Yeah.
around technology more so than an individual developer problem. I do think for individual developers, I'd come back to that judgment. How are you honing good judgment? How are you seeing the uncommon pattern to better engineering? Um, Move away from the hero complex, even though it's really well rewarded. Heroes are rewarded.
Yeah, because they have
When you save
followers,
a company,
right? But that's the problem because followers are even in a worse spot, So
that's right. That's right. And it was remarkable to me realizing like whenever we had a problem with my product, my stakeholders wanted to know who fixed it so they could like send them a gift or a bottle of wine or whatever. Like they're just like, thank you for doing whatever it is you did. And I'm like, but you should be mad because they didn't do whatever it was we needed to do to prevent this from happening. So yes, I agree. I'm very thankful to the individual that solved the problem that got us back up. I'm very mad that we as a unit didn't do whatever it was we needed to do to prevent this from happening in the first place because we're both in the
yeah,
same team.
yeah,
And unfortunately, you incent hero culture enough, and teams will almost inadvertently like just allow themselves to fall into serial failure so that they can be heroes. It creates opportunity.
it feels so great, right? When you save the
It
day,
feels wonderful. Yeah,
when you
yeah.
firefight something for 2 months straight, and you just feel like a hero. But yeah, it's
I
it,
worked my tail off. I got rewarded. I got seen. I got recognized. My name is known by the CTO, who never would have known my name otherwise. Like and it's totally natural, but it's an anti-pattern. It's not how we should live. Um,
yeah,
and ultimately, it's not good for the team. It's not good for the person that gets celebrated either.
yeah, definitely, definitely. So we should slowly start wrapping up, and I have two questions that.
Already?
Oh yeah, already, but don't worry, you can come again because I really like to talk with you about software engineering topics every time. But yeah, I have two questions that I ask every guest, and first one is that I would like you to share with us some, fuck up, like real
Oof.
story about something which went sideways in your career. Tough one, right?
Lots of opportunities for this one. Um,
Something not sensitive and not
yeah,
causing
yeah,
any issues.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'll share this because I this was a key moment in my development. And I wish I remembered the details a little bit better, but it was something to do with K-12. It was while I was at Pearson. It was early days for me as a executive product manager. It's my first time running multiple product managers, BAs, user experience, and this woman came to me. She worked for me. She was a business analyst, and she said, "Scott, I think you're wrong about this. It was a rule that we were putting in place for access management for K-12."
Yeah.
And at the time, a big part of my own pride and ego was in being right. I just really I understood identity and access management better than anybody I knew. I had read everything available on the web at the time, and fortunately, it's things have moved on since
Yeah.
then for the world. This is like 15 years ago or more. Gosh, more. Ouch, almost
Oh.
20 years ago. God, I'm old. But she said this, and I said, "No, you're wrong." And I was actually really annoyed at her for even like saying, like even questioning me, because again, like it was so important to me to be right. I'd invested a lot in this woman and coached her. And I said, go have these conversations and with these people, and you'll see that I'm right. But go have those conversations and come back to me. she came back to me and was like, Scott, I'm really like, here's what I've learned. Like, I haven't done all the things you asked me to do, but I did a few of them. And I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. And at that moment, I saw the wisdom of what she was saying. And I said, I actually think you're right. And I had this weird, very intense moment where I was caught between my anger at being questioned and possibly wrong. Like I was very disappointed in myself for missing this point. Um, but I also was so proud of her because this is someone I had invested a ton of time, energy in growing. And here she was like sprouting her wings and figuring something out that I had missed. And I decided at that moment it was a very, very quick moment, but very salient, very memorable for me. I still remember it very well to this day. I opted to just be really proud of her. I was like, you know what? You're right. Don't do any of those other things. Let's change the requirement to that. And let's socialize that with the team. And she was like, thank you. And she was elated to get my blessing on this. And I was elated because here, all my investment was bearing fruit. Like she was doing that, and it made me realize like I don't have to be right all the time. That's not my value. My value is in helping the team get it right. And so I may have ideas in the gaps. I can make decisions when the team needs a decision and they don't have it, but I'm probably better off empowering people like her to do their work to the fullest of their ability, ask good questions, and get them to inspect the decisions that they're making, but let them make those decisions. They're going to be closer to the action. I can't be in all these places. So it's a big moment, I think, of leverage for me to realize like, if I want to govern bigger groups of people doing bigger things, I need to let go and let them do their thing. And it's not so important that I be right all the time. It's important that I coach, I have wisdom, I help them be better versions of themselves. And then again, when there's gaps and the team doesn't know what to do, I use my first principles and my experience, my judgment to try to make the best possible decision I can, help the team make that decision on little information. But this whole like getting it right is more important than being right. There's a lot in that statement. You've probably seen me post that on LinkedIn before, but I think it's so important because we can be so prideful, and engineers, I know like engineers, like that pride really messes with you. And being wrong can feel like what a step back or what a knock to your prestige or your value. And it's just not true. It's okay. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be right all the time. You need to be more right than wrong, and you need to show good judgment, and you need to help others be better versions of themselves. You do those things, you're going to win. You're going to win the lifetime achievement award, which is more important than winning a sprint or a particular debate or whatever. So that was something where I made a mistake, but I think it led to a really important lesson for me on who I wanted to be, and enabled me to do a lot better things. So
Yeah, that's cool.
but I got that one wrong, and it was in the moment. I was hot. I was really upset.
Yeah, that's some learning, right?
Mhm.
Wisdom that you talked about. That's cool.
Yeah, but in such a deep well, like learning about myself in this way, like, oh, I didn't realize how important it was for me to be right all the time, and to know everything. And I was like, wait, how do I think that was going to turn out? I really hadn't thought about it. Up until then, I was a one-man show trying to do all the things, and I just needed other people to take meetings. At that point, I was like, no, this is a team sport, and I need to operate more as a coach than the star player on the team. That's not my role.
Okay. So one last thing. What I want from you is like a take-home message. If you should just tell our listeners one thing that they should take home with them from this interview, one most important thing, what it should be.
Well, I didn't have any time to prepare. Well,
Intentionally.
I do think so. And this might feel like a cheap shot, but it's meaningful for me. Getting it right is more important than being right. I think is a great motto to come back to, because a lot of times we get caught up in the short term effects of what we're doing, how it makes us feel. And I think if we can extend that time horizon, we'll see being part of a team that is winning in the market with our stakeholders, right, is doing good work, is viewed as doing good work, feels good. Whether you contributed the key code that made everything go or not, or you asked the salient question, or you got the thing right, is not what's going to matter. Our legacy is in what we do together, right? And so removing yourself, not removing yourself, but realizing that your self-actualization is through the team and through the product that we build together, I think is a really powerful concept, and gives us opportunities to be a little bit wiser in what we do from day to day, and build more valuable stuff, and affect more people's lives in a positive way. So get it right. Don't try to be right.